So let's talk about Marathon, because there's a lot here that I like. And there's a lot here that I have questions about. What's happening, guys? Welcome back to another video, and today we're digging into some of the details around the newest game from Bungie, the original creators of Halo and the creators of Destiny, because we just got our first big-time deep dive into the game and the kind of experience it's going to be packing when it finally launches. So to hit the highlights, Marathon is the return of one of Bungie's original IP from way back in the day, but instead of this being what we would call a boomer shooter today, or the equivalent, they're revamping this in 2025 to return as an extraction shooter. Now, obviously, Escape from Tarkov is the big game that comes to mind, but I've also seen a ton of people tossing around the Cycle Frontier as something they would compare it to. Rest in peace. Didn't have enough people to keep the servers going and shut down in 2023. Hoping that's not the case with this one. In Marathon, you play as a runner, a cybernetic mercenary that drops onto the planet of Tau Ceti 4 to find resources and supplies in the abandoned settlements, extract and then take inventory of all of the loot that you found to improve your kit and do it all over again. It's got that kind of grind that fans of this genre love, but it's also something that's easy for anyone to pick up and understand. You drop in, you shoot some guys, you collect some stuff, and you wash, rinse, and repeat. Now, before we get too far into it here, I do want to set a baseline for who I am as a player, because this is all just my 2 cents on the game. And I'm someone who loves old school Halo, who loves the gunplay of Destiny, but then that fell off whenever the grind started to get too hardcore and time consuming. And I have never and will never play Escape from Tarkov, because I'm a big fan of multiplayer shooters, but I'm also a solo player 99% of the time. I'm just hopping on to grab a few games after work, not doing anything too hyper competitive. I'm just enjoying my time and getting a few headshots along the way. I do not need to sweat that much. So with that personal history and perspective in mind, I want to start off with what I love the most about Marathon, and that is absolutely the art design and the aesthetic, because I've never really seen a game that has the look and feel of something like this. I mean, Marathon is straight out of a sci-fi novel. It's got that polished and clean look of something like Mirror's Edge, and that design is being led by Joseph Cross, who was a concept designer on Destiny 2 and even did some concept art on Dune Part 1. And it's this unique visual style that immediately grabbed my attention when this game was shown off in 2023. I love anything that's got that techno-futuristic kind of look to it, and between the teaser trailer, the gameplay, and this cinematic trailer by Alberto Mielgo, probably butchered that name, my bad, but he worked on Love, Death, and Robots, you can inject this all directly into my veins. This is my thing every single day of the week, and I am absolutely going to make this my entire personality for the next 5 months. Now, obviously, the pre-rendered stuff looks good, but when it comes to the graphics themselves in-game, there's still a lot to appreciate, but I'm not seeing the same level of graphical fidelity as compared to Destiny 2. And if you haven't played that game in a while, especially since the next-gen update on PS5 and Series X, give it a look, because it is super impressive. I'm saying Destiny 2 is one of the best-looking games this generation, if it can count as this generation. However you want to think about that. But I do think that with Marathon, Bungie is trying to capture a certain kind of aesthetic here, and the gameplay that they've shown off so far is hitting the quality mark while maintaining a kind of sleek, sanitized, and minimalistic look with a lot of colors popping in every corner. And the other thing to keep in mind here is this is on pre-alpha gameplay, so what we are seeing could have more tweaks and changes leading up to launch. But for my personal preferences, I would like a little bit more grit. I don't think that this game is meant to look hyper realistic in the same way that I think we're trained to think about a lot of games these days. It's definitely got a stylized look to it, but I would like to see more stuff that looks kind of like Earth from Destiny, where it's got rust and it's kind of falling and decrepit, but it still has the remnants of the society that was there. I like that kind of thing, and I think Marathon could use a little bit more of it. But the looks aren't everything. In fact, for a game like Marathon, it's really all about the gameplay, and I'm going to keep it real. The first snippets of gameplay Bungie showed off were not the most polished looking gameplay and gunplay specifically from the studio that I've ever seen. And if you aren't familiar with how important Bungie is, their team is known for having some of the most fantastic controls out there on consoles. I mean, the original Halo trilogy paved the way for shooters on consoles, period. And Destiny 2 is one of the smoothest console games out there once you get your settings dialed in and get into the flow of the game. And Marathon absolutely has some Destiny 2 DNA in there. I mean, you look at some of the abilities, some of the finishers, the gunplay itself. I mean, some of these PvE interactions are basically Destiny 2 without the damage numbers popping up in the UI, and that's not a bad thing. A lot of the reason that anyone wants to play a Bungie game is to get that Bungie gameplay, and I do think there is an expectation for the studio to deliver on something that hits that bar of what players would expect from Bungie, and so far, it seems like Bungie is on the right track here. Now, I will say one concern with the gameplay is that it just looks slower compared to something like Black Ops 6 or Apex Legends if you want something that's a little bit more comparable with the 3-man squads. For Bungie to jump into the extraction shooter scene and keep the pace and flow of Destiny feels like a very intentional choice to not get the game flowing too quickly, and I'm curious how people that are transitioning over from faster games that might be interested in checking out Marathon feel about that kind of speed if they stick with this and it feels like this going into launch. But past the movement, there's a good bit of depth to the builds as well here. You've got 6 different runners to choose from at launch, and basically they lend themselves to different classes that can fit to the way that you want to play. If you're slow and tactical, there's a runner for that. If you're running and gunning, there's a runner for that too, and then it gets even deeper with the weapon leveling and customization, runner leveling and customization. You've literally got cybernetic implants that can give different passive buffs and abilities. There's a lot of different stuff here, and you manage it all in a Destiny meets Tarkov kind of inventory management in-game customization system, and then when you get in, get what you need, and get out, you can dig in, customize, and upgrade, and do it all over again. Now, all of that is what I would consider to be the good stuff, the promising side that could be spelling a comeback for Marathon that makes it fun and relevant for a new generation by bringing a sweet look for an extraction shooter. But I'm not fully confident in everything. One of the big questions I have is about the money, and right now, as of April 13th, Bungie hasn't revealed any specifics on pricing for Marathon, but this will not be a free-to-play game. GameSpot originally said the game was going to launch as a premium product, meaning players will be asked to pay full price. That is verbatim what they said, and that was then shared by Wario64 on Twitter, and that started getting traction before the Marathon account had to jump in and say that Marathon will be a premium title. Marathon will not be a full-priced title. We'll announce details later this summer. Now, I would imagine this has got to be in that $40 to $50 price range, just like Helldivers and Concord, which are 2 games that might have the same price tag, but that have very different routes of how their stories went down. On one hand, going with a premium release guarantees the developers make money instead of relying on battle passes and microtransactions alone to pay the bills and keep new content on the game flowing, but that comes at the cost of having a smaller pool of people playing and talking about the game at launch, because you have to go out and spend money to buy it. Someone that doesn't play extraction shooters probably isn't going to want to spend money on a game that they think they won't like, but on the flip side, launching as a free-to-play game would open up the game to literally millions of players that might be that kind of player, on the fence and end up falling in love with what Bungie made here. But at the same time, that free-to-play model doesn't have a guaranteed income to the studio tied to it, and at the end of the day, games are made for companies to make money. We happen to get some cool entertainment along the way, but they're there to get some cash. So I get why they're going with the Helldivers approach of making some money up front and then likely having microtransactions and battle passes going forward after launch. And to be clear, we don't have any definitive details on that right now, as of, again, April 13th. Just stands to reason that it's a live service shooter and it's going to have that kind of setup in the modern way that we play. But then there's the question of how aggressive the microtransactions are going to be, which isn't really even worth speculating on, but based on how Destiny 2 has been handled since going free to play, it's safe to say the cosmetics are going to be a big part of the income driver here, and there's a ton of potential for cool looking stuff because of the art style. It's very neat. My main concern is the addition of sponsored packs, and these were mentioned a few times during the show, and according to Polygon, a sponsored pack is a free or cheap in terms of credits, the in-game currency loadout that comes with low-quality versions of everything you need. I'm assuming that paying for a premium game up front will mean you can pretty quickly earn weapons and loadouts that you need without feeling pressured to spend extra real cash on sponsored packs or anything you can buy in-game that would change the way you play, or maybe it'll have a Helldivers setup where you can find and earn the Marathon equivalent of super credits while you're out for a run. But the question is really how good stuff like sponsored packs will be if you can buy weapons in-game compared to what you can earn and how fast you can earn it, because the more time I spend in-game, the more compelling spending $5 on an assault rifle might feel. But talking about the money aside, my biggest concern with Marathon is really with the game itself, because what Bungie said about the way they're thinking about this game can really be taken in 2 ways. Extraction shooters are known for being pretty intense, especially when it comes to something like Tarkov, but the Marathon team is saying that they are wanting to make something that anybody can dive into and really enjoy. They've got tutorials to onboard people onto the experience, they've added user contracts, according to Polygon, that can give people that might be new here a kind of on-the-rails experience, but they also keep some of that DNA of the hardcore extraction shooters alive in Marathon. Thinking through your strategies in a run, using your abilities in combination with the rest of your squad, it's got some depth to the gameplay. My worry is that by making a game for everyone, Bungie could be making a game for no one. The people that are really going to dive into Marathon and be able to make the most of it are the people that are grinding other competitive games games that rely on that cooperative experience. Apex, Warzone, even Destiny I would say could be tossed in here, but you're losing a lot of people from those communities along the way, because even in my own comments I've already seen a ton of people that are immediately out on the idea of playing an extraction shooter, even if it's one from Bungie. Apex and Warzone are battle royale, so it's kind of a different objective and gameplay style altogether. Even Destiny is a mostly PvE experience without that hardcore PvP element unless you go into Crucible. If Bungie is trying to make Marathon a game that anyone can dive into and play, my concern is that it won't have the difficulty and depth that extraction shooter fans are looking for, but that it also might either still be too intense for casual players or too different for people that are already ingrained in these other games that are competing for someone's attention. And keep in mind, you still got to pay for it. And I mean, that's a big point of entry these days when you've got so many free-to-play games out there and so little time for a lot of people to really play games. I mean, I even think about Helldivers too, because there's a lot of similarities between Marathon and Helldivers that I think we can make here. A smaller price tag, you've got PvE elements in there, 3-man squads. People have been playing that game consistently for over a year and they might be looking for something new, but that is a PvE experience with a different kind of feel compared to something like Marathon. They might both be games with 3-man squads of friends that are looking for something to play, but I don't know how many Helldivers players would immediately fall in love with the intensity of something like Marathon. Now, if you've been following the channel for a while, you probably know I always go into any game optimistic, and Bungie has the chance to really capture a gap in the market right now. There aren't really any intense extraction shooters on consoles that would compete directly with Marathon. I mean, you've got Hunt Showdown, maybe, but even that is something that's kind of in its own camp. If Bungie can make Marathon compelling enough for fans of other extraction shooters to stick around and accessible enough for more casual players to jump in, then I do think there is potential for this to be a new, different life for a series that's been on ice for more than 20 years. But I will say that is a big if in a time when so many people are ingrained in existing games and they have so many games competing for their attention. But that's where my head's at right now, and we're going to get way more information on Marathon in the months ahead, but I would love to hear from you down below. What do you think about Marathon based on this trailer and gameplay, and most importantly, do you plan on giving it a shot? I would love to know your thoughts. And of course, if you're new here, you like what you see and what you hear, hit that subscribe button for videos like this every week and gaming news shorts throughout the week to keep you in the loop, and I'll catch you on the next one.